wonderful chat with executive producer, showrunner, and writer Joseph Mallozzi. I'm here with Joseph Mallozzi. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Mark. How are you doing?
I am just lovely. I'm so happy to have you. I'm absolutely thrilled to have a chat. So as I ask everyone that I have on the show, tell us who you are and what you do.
Sure. I am Joseph Mallozzi. I'm a writer, producer, and showrunner with a little over 400 hours of produced television to my credit. Notable productions include the Stargate franchise, SG1, Atlantis, Universe, as well as my own show, Dark Matter. That's the 2015 ship-based show, not the more recent Apple series. That is also a sci-fi show with the exact same name and title font.
Awesome. Very awesome. As someone who enjoyed SG1 and just finished Dark Matter, I applaud your work very, very much so.
Thank you.
And a lot of people probably may have heard the term showrunner. And again, you've probably been asked this a lot, but the difference between a showrunner and producer.
Sure. Yeah, well, producer could actually mean a lot of things. Producer can range from a vanity credit, like maybe you suggested someone pursue the rights to a book and then they ended up, securing the rights, or they name you a producer, or, you bring money to the table, that could make you a producer. Or you could be a hands-on producer, someone who's involved in production, either, dealing with budget or the creative process. In my case, I was an executive producer and a showrunner. Now, showrunner entails pretty much what it implies, the fact that you run the show. So as a showrunner, I am the de facto capo, capo di tutti capi. My job is to kind of oversee production, everything from casting and construction, the building of sets, to costumes and final edits.
Wow, that's impressive. I think the best way to put it is the person who runs the show, because oddly enough, the term showrunner doesn't sound like it's on the level of a producer, but it's sort of above what a producer is.
Well, showrunners are usually executive producers of a show. And, we can go through the various distinctions of producer, everything from associate producer to co-producer to producer to supervising producer, co-executive producers, and ultimately executive producers. Again, they can all mean very different things, but for the most part, a showrunner is usually also an executive producer, the show's executive producer.
And so were you the executive producer of SG1?
Yeah, so my writing partner and I, Paul Mully, joined during the show's 4th season as co-producers and ultimately worked our way up. Again, co-producers, just kind of an entry-level credit, and then we became producers, and we began to oversee our own episodes, meaning we would write the scripts, and then we would oversee prep. So prep week usually takes place before the beginning of production, and prep week is comprised of all the department heads getting together, going through the script, and then attending the various meetings. You go to the costume meetings, and you tell the costume people what you need for every scene in the script. And you go to the props meeting, and you decide what props you want to see, and you go to the art department meeting, and you discuss the various sets that need to be built. And so, you become essentially a supervising producer. And then a step up from that, it's co-executive producer. And then finally, when you get executive producer, that's when you've hit the big time. That's the ultimate credit amongst producer credits.
So, and as the executive producer, you're still writing. You're besides all that other stuff. So you were high above and in the trenches at the same time.
Yes. Again, executive producer can mean a lot of things, but most of the executive producers on Stargate were writers as well, writer-producers. So Brad Wright, Robert Cooper. Brad Wright was a co-creator of SG1, Atlantis, and Universe. Rob Cooper was a co-creator of Atlantis and Universe. And Paul and I were exec producers, ultimately Carl Binder, Martin Garrow, all worked their way up to the exec producer role. But at the end of the day, they were creative producers. We all wrote, we all spun stories, we all gave notes on each other's scripts, each other's episodes. So very hands-on.
So you mentioned Paul as your writing partner. What did that really mean to you to have a writing partner? Because I think for different people, it means different things.
Yeah, and for us, it did mean different things. We no longer write together, but when we did in the very beginning, I mean, we take a lot of the pressure off. So when we initially started as a writing team on SG1, we would actually sit in the same room and write together. I mean, bounce dialogue off each other and run the scripts back, scenes back and forth. And then as we got kind of busier, we started to pitch the script back and forth between us where, I would write maybe the first 3 pages, send it to him, and he would rewrite it and write the next, few pages after that. And we would, go back and forth because we started to get kind of busy with other aspects of production. And then ultimately got to the point where we'd be working on our own separate scripts. And I would write a first draft, or he would write a first draft, and we'd swap and do revisions on each other's drafts, to the point where in the end, we were essentially writing as individuals. So even though we were writing partners, I mean, very much so in the beginning, we did less as creative partners, as creative script writers, co-writers, as the show evolved, just because our roles evolved in the show. We got busier, and it just didn't make sense to write the way we used to write, just in the room together and pitching ideas back and forth.
Did you miss that at all when you had so much more on your shoulders?
Not really, because it was kind of new and exciting, exploring things like editing and like I said, the various aspects of overseeing production. Yeah, getting to have the final say on things like casting and costumes was a treat. So I mean, I always loved to write. Now, I've always been a very prolific writer, so I don't feel like we wrote any less at the end of the day. I think we always averaged about 7 scripts per season out of 20 or so. But it was rewarding in many other ways, I would say.
Very, very cool. So you also mentioned dark matter, which I can say I definitely love that. And I just have to say that it was such a neat hearkening back. It reminded me of like role-playing days many years ago. There's role-playing games like Space Opera and Travelers and things where like you're out in your ship alone and you can do what you want. It's an empty big universe. And I got that feeling out of nowhere when I was watching the show, and it was just such a cool thing. You explore amnesia and personalities and a whole bunch of things, to the point where I almost thought of the show as like gray matter versus dark matter. And I know that's a silly pun, but it was such a cool thing to see. And so that was your project then. And I noticed that you also just recently found that these are books that you wrote, and that's where this is from?
No, well, I'd written the pilot of Dark Matter while I was working on Stargate, and the idea was to, kind of springboard. Once Stargate ended, we would springboard onto our own show, Dark Matter. The only problem was that Stargate kept on getting picked up year after year after year. Then we did Atlantis, then we did Universe, and one of the great things about that is that it allowed me to sit with this idea for so long that I ended up mapping out a 5-year plan for the series. I mapped out all the arcs for all the characters and all their backstories. And what that allowed me to do when the time came, not only to write the scripts fairly quickly because I knew what I wanted to see and what I wanted to do, but it allowed me to drop in clues, like seed clues throughout the early goings in the episode, in the early episodes that will pay off sometimes sometimes seasons later. And as a viewer, I find those type of that kind of storytelling just very satisfying. In that instead of the writers kind of making it up as they go along, you realize they have a plan and they've taken care to construct, an interesting narrative with setups and payoffs. And one of the things I also wanted to do is Dark Matter. There were so many mysteries in Dark Matter that we set up in the very early going, and I didn't want to do kind of like what Lost did, where they set up these mysteries and most of them never get paid off in the end. So I would kind of pay off these mysteries as we went along, but set up other mysteries and kept these other mysteries alive. And so that was kind of a lot of fun. Again, a lot of that had to do with the fact that I sat on that idea for so long that I was able to really flesh everything out in my mind. And then when it came time to take the script out, like I said, I had the script, I had the idea for the show, but I decided to do it kind of another way. I decided to essentially establish it as an IP first, as IP being intellectual property, because I got my start in development. And one of the things that I learned very early on in development is that everyone loves an established property, an IP, because then they can say, look, there's already an audience for this. This makes sense. So I reached out to Dark Horse and I pitched out a gentleman by the name of Keith Goldberg my idea for Dark Matter. The idea being that we would launch as a comic book and then we would use the comic book to sell the TV show. And he loved the idea, and they didn't want to commit to more than 4 issues. So those first 4 issues were the first 2 episodes of what would be the series. And so we launched the comic book and they collected the first 4 issues in a trade paperback. And then Jay Firestone of Prodigy Pictures went out and pitched the show, and he would leave the comic book behind. And it was such a great visual aid to allow executives to kind of envision what the show would look like, what the show would be about. And based on that, we ended up selling the series. And so I already had kind of a pilot script already in my back pocket, and the show was greenlit, and we were ready to go.
Yeah, it seems. I mean, it explains how grounded it feels. It feels like it's been around forever. When I watched it, it didn't feel like, what are they going to make up next time? Which would be the opposite end of the spectrum, kind of like what you're saying. And the whole payoff thing, I am thrilled by someone who enjoys writing and also reading and seeing really good stories. Like, they stand out. There's such a difference between stories that create clues and don't insult the viewer. They don't insult the reader. And that's something that I tried really hard with what I wrote, and that I didn't want to insult the reader, and I wanted the payoffs to be there, that the longer and the more you paid attention, the more you'd be excited about. It's almost like a sense of productivity. It's just such an interesting feeling to get that.
A sense of dramatic satisfaction. And it's hard to walk that fine line. So as a writer, you want to make it a challenge for the viewer or the reader, but you don't want to, but on the other hand, you want to make it too difficult to get there. And this is one of the critiques I would always get back from my fellow writers when I worked on Stargate, is the fact that, I always gave the audience too much credit. I needed to explain more. And I always loathed to explain and, offer too much exposition. That was always kind of, the bane of my existence as a writer. And that's why I so love Dark Matter. At the beginning, it had its pros and cons, because these characters wake up with no memories of who they are or how they got on board. So you can't explain anything. There's going to be, there's no, telling their story or them, through flashbacks, they're them telling their stories. They're on the ride at the same time as a viewer. And while that's a good thing, on the other hand, like, the early critiques I got from the show was the fact that, these characters feel like stock, like 2-dimensional archetypes. And I agree, they necessarily are, because they have no backstory. So, for instance, the character of 3, everybody was like, he's just like Jane and Firefly, kind of the longtime gunslinger. And initially he is, and everybody hated the character. I remember when the episode, when the pilot first came out, and I remember talking to Anthony Lemke, who played 3, and he laughed because he had read the first 9 scripts, so he knew where we were going. And sure enough, by the end of the show's 3-season run, sadly cut short, he and the android were the 2 fan favorites, because you go on that journey with the character and you think they're one thing, and then as the story progresses, they become someone else. And that's whether it be like the big, kind of chestnut sci-fi concepts or just these characters, always kind of liked undermining audience expectations. If you can A, surprise an audience, and B, make them laugh, that's another big thing about Dark Matter, and I learned quickly in Stargate. Just humor goes such a long way towards allowing audiences to connect with characters. So I wanted all the characters to be kind of funny in different ways, subtle, sometimes more overt, and sure enough, that's I think that's why the show is as popular as it ultimately was. The fact that the character, viewers are really able to connect with these characters.
I think that's ultimately what you want to do. And I guess I'm like everyone else, because those are my 2 favorites as well. And Android was easier because there was that obvious arc there of that.
Yes.
The way that worked. But he was someone who definitely seemed not two-dimensional, but he had so many barriers up about not wanting to believe or experience things. He just wanted to be him, but then you found this super tender side of him, and that he was such a genuine person. He almost became like the everyman, so that was your connection as the viewer to, like, as if you were there. Like, that's how it almost felt.
Yeah, and obviously, I always liked kind of ensemble shows. So SG1 and Atlantis and Universe, very much ensemble shows. And that's another thing. You can kind of you're able to explore characters through their relationship with other characters. One of my favorite relationships was this relationship 3 had, this gruff, gunslinger had with the kid 5, who's kind of this precocious, and there's that wonderful scene where, he's off to sort of join his, his former family, and he has to take out a loan, and basically she charges him, compounding interest, and you can tell sort of like there's that kind of banter and fun between a big brother little sister relationship, but even though she's kind of taking advantage of him, you can see that they really care about each other. And at the end of the day, that's one of the most important things I think all great sci-fi does very well, is the kind of found family concept, whether it's the crew of the Enterprise or Team SG1 or the Raza crew. They're all kind of these disparate individuals thrown together by circumstance who come together and kind of form bonds and become kind of this found family, us against the universe or the galaxy in this case.
It's sort of that whole family you chose kind of concept, and that it feels and you choose it in front of the viewer, so they get to see that. And then when you're talking about how people relate and their characters grow, it's really cool, and it's really good writing when you see a character change, but only around certain people. So like 6, and how he became very protective of 5. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. How he became protective, and his personality would sort of change. If 3 was in the room, he'd be a little more manly with him and so forth. Yeah, but you could see that, and that was such a cool thing. And I felt like she was definitely the glue that held everything together as well. I think that was probably one of her jobs, and she did it really well. It was really cool. And so I watched the last episode, and I went, no.
Yes, I know. Well, I can send you. I wrote up some. We were actually in the writers' room for season 4 when we heard that we'd been canceled.
Wow.
So I ended up writing up these what I call the virtual episodes. So the first 3 episodes of season 4, what we have planned. So basically, it answers that cliffhanger.
Yeah. And they're in what directory that I can get to? Where?
I can give you a link. It's on my blog, but I'll always post it online. And someone was actually very nice on YouTube. I ended up posting photos to go along with the breakdown of the episodes, like a scene by scene breakdown, and they put it to video. So it's kind of fun. I'll send that your way so you can have some closure. But I was kind of bitter. I will admit I was bitter with not just a cancellation, the fact that, as I said, I had approached the show as kind of a 5-season arc, each episode dealing with a different theme, beginning, middle, and end. I mean, the end of the first episode, you find out they're cutthroats and criminals, and the first season ends with them, appropriately enough, being arrested and being carted off to prison. And then season 2 was kind of this redemption arc where they're going to sort of try and be better people, and it blows up literally in their face with the destruction of the EOS 7 space station. Then season 3 was, one of them goes dark side, and 4 becomes a big bad. It's a battle against him. And season 4 was going to be the alien invasion, and season 5 was going to be the android revolution. And just the way the whole cancellation went down just left a bad taste in my mouth. I mean, I understand this is a business, and I mean, this is reality. No show's guaranteed. A 5-year order. Having said that, I would argue that if you are asking audiences to invest of themselves in a series, you should offer them the opportunity for closure. And so when we found out we had been we had been canceled, we reached out to Sci-Fi and requested, can we just have a movie so we can just wrap things up? And they didn't even deign to respond to the email. And that set me off. So I was pretty peeved. And again, just the way it went down, as I said, I have about 400 hours of produced television to my credit, 350 of it in science fiction, almost all of it for the Sci-Fi Channel. In fact, at the time, I don't think anyone produced more TV for Sci-Fi, for that network, than I did. And instead of reaching out to me to tell me, hey, we have to cancel the show and have a discussion with me, they just contacted the president of the production company, who had to relay the information to me. Said they did not respond to our request for the movie. And then after canceling us, they ended up giving Killjoys, which was our lead-in, it was always Killjoys and Dark Matter, our Sci-Fi Friday kind of sister show. They gave Killjoys a 2-season order. So everybody was coming into my office saying, oh, so they essentially gave our, clearly, I felt as though they intentionally or not sent a message. And so once that happened, kind of the gloves were off, and I was pretty vocal about my displeasure, shall we say.
Well, that says a lot. I mean, that says a lot for your passion for the thing that you created, that a lot of people, bless their hearts, won't really understand the involvement, the emotional, intellectual involvement in creating something. And that's a whole subject that I'm fascinated with, is like where that even comes from. Like, it's one of the only things in life where we can't explain the origin of like real creativity. Like, and I see you shaking your head. It's like the same thing. It's like you can create something yourself and go, wait, how did I manifest that? Because you'll impress yourself.
Yes. And a great example is that, I was working on an episode called Ripple Effect for Stargate SG1. And usually when we sit in the room, we come up with ideas. The episode Ripple Effect involved various SG1 teams from alternate realities coming to our reality, and then us, I think, teaming up with a team from like the Black Universe. We call them the Black Universe because they were the black uniforms, who were after, I don't know what they were, I forget what they were after, but we had beaten out the episode, meaning, the writers sit in a room and basically break down the episode scene by scene. And there's a twist at the end where our team has to turn the tables on, Black Stargate SG1, and we couldn't figure out how to do it. And then I went off and wrote the outline, and I didn't know how to do it. And then I sat down and wrote the script. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to know how to, when the time comes, is it going to come to me? And magically, somehow it came to me, and I found the solution. It's like the time loop episode in Dark Matter. We tried to break that episode in the room for like days, and we couldn't do it. And then I just sat down one day, and pretty much the entire episode came to me. I just wrote it without an outline, just in a white heat, and it all fell together. And it turned out to be the fan favorite. And I don't know where it came from. I don't, there are times when I've actually sat down and tried to write, and I've gone days unable to write. And then sometimes when I do write, I'm never happy with what I have. And then there are other times when, like you said, it's like magic.
Yeah. And if you'll allow me, because I don't want this to be about me at all, but if you'll allow me,
please, yeah.
On that. So I wrote a bunch of books, and they were all actually nonfiction, experimental psychology stuff. And then one day my mind was unusually clear, and it's never clear because I'm always thinking about something. There's a cemetery by my house. So I took a walk in the cemetery completely, and all of a sudden I heard voices, not like crazy dead people voices, but like the conversation between the two main characters at the end of a movie. And I was like, okay, tell me more. Like I played out the dialogue, and I'm sure you understand completely what that is. And then I just started to write a poem in my head, like a sing-songy kind of medieval poem. And I thought, I got to go home. So I went home, I wrote this long piece of paper, and I looked at my God, that's an outline for a book. And I ended up writing this fantasy, this epic coming-of-age hero's journey set 1,000 years in this dystopian future thing. I'm like, what is this? And I wrote the whole thing, and it just came out of somewhere, like out of nowhere. And then I ended up writing the sequel, and then I wrote the prequel because everyone was wondering what happened in those 1,000 years. And it was amazing. It was just, and I have no explanation for it, and I never will. It was just the most amazing, wonderful thing.
Yeah, and like I said, I wish I could find an explanation for exactly that, because if I could find an explanation, I feel as though I would be much more successful. But the fact is, you never know when it's going to hit you. And, sometimes, usually like when you're doing something completely different, like you said, you were taking a walk. For me, it used to be when I would drive, or when I was in the shower, or when my ex used to talk to me over dinner. That's when all the ideas would come and I would run dialogue in my head.
Yeah, it's almost like you have to be occupied in a way, but you don't need to give it all of your attention, and then your brain wanders, and it feels free, like you give it a license to do whatever the heck it wants.
Yes.
And it goes, oh, I can do that now. And I was so terrified when I started on the sequel to it, because I ended the book midway. It was almost like the whole Star Wars thing, where Star Wars is a self-contained movie, but it's part of a trilogy. It was the way that it ended up. But I was terrified to start the sequel, because I thought, well, this won't work again, Mark. You can't just sit here and continue. And by the second chapter, I was right back in, and I felt even more comfortable. Excellent. Because I was the first book was more of like you're in a fog, and that's why I love Dark Matter so much, because the viewer and the characters are in the same kind of what the heck is going on, and that's how that book is that and again, it rewards people for paying attention and not going, please hold my hand too much. And so it was that way. And then the second one was more of an exploration, now that you know what the universe looks like. And so it's such a cool thing, and I'm glad to be able to relay that to you, because it was an amazing experience.
Exactly the same way for me. Exactly the same way.
Wow.
I think with a lot of writers as well.
Well, and I also wanted to say thank you for being vulnerable about your experience with Dark Matter. Not everyone would talk about that, about how you were sort of bitter and angry, and how that made you feel, because I would imagine most people who are humans would feel that way. People who are dedicated and invested in their story. So I appreciate you sharing that.
I like you said, I'm also tend to be very protective of my cast and crew. And I felt just the way it all went down, it was very disrespectful across the board.
Yeah,
so.
Right. Because you're also a family in that way, I guess, right? Like,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're sort of the caretaker in a way, because you're again the glue. You're the five. Was it five?
Yeah. I'm the five.
You're the five in this story. So that should be a good phrase. I'm going to say that, and people will be like, "What are you talking about?" So, speaking of like the family and the actors and things like that, it's probably is it different depending on the project and how you connect with them, communicate with them, dialogue, stuff like that? Is there different?
You know what? It really depends on the actors. So, as a showrunner, I always told them I have a very open door policy. If anyone could come up to my office and talk to me if they had any issues or wanted to talk things through. And each actor had a different approach. Now, we would have past read-throughs, usually like a week before we went to camera. And the reason most productions do that is to ensure that all the cast has actually read the script, one, but two, to hopefully push them to come, if they have any concerns or issues with the script, to come to us early so we can change it, before you get too heavily into prep, rather than waiting for the last minute. And so it depended on the actor. So Roger Cross, who played Six, wonderful guy. Every time he's in Toronto, we get together for dinner. He, after every read-through, would come and sit in my office and be like, hey, can I say this? Can I say this? Why do we do this? We do this. And that was great. The opposite end of the spectrum was Anthony Lemke, who played Three, who was a gunslinger, and Anthony I keep in touch with all the time as well. In fact, we just spoke, I think, last week. He would basically come to set, and he didn't want to have big changes, but he would always like to try something new. Like, instead of doing this as scripted, how about we do this? And I used to tell him, do what's in the script, and then do a take where you do what you want to do. I always give him the creative freedom to do that. And then Zoe Palmer, who I'm supposed to get together with lunch with maybe the end of this month, who played our android, she would just text me. She would review the script. She'd be like, hey, and I have my questions. And then finally, 5, Jodelle Furland, she never had questions, never made any changes to her lines of dialogue, and always delivered the lines exactly as I had imagined them when I wrote the script. And for better or worse, actors will always deliver a line differently. but she was always dead on exactly like I would imagine it, or as you know.
So,
just,
what do you attribute that to? Her ability to do that? Like, what?
I guess she really embraced her character, and in her mind, her character was very much the vision I had in my mind of this character. This, and I mean, you know, this character was inspired. Do you ever watch Cowboy Bebop?
I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
Okay, well, the character of Radical Edward, who's this kid, who's this kind of a kooky, you know, she's very much, you know, patterned after Radical Edward, but a lot of like these anime characters, kind of the kooky kid characters. And Jodelle herself is a huge anime fan, so I think she got what I was trying to, you know, what I wanted from this character. So she very much got that. And also, I mean, in terms of Jodelle, you know, I worked with her very early on in her career. I want to say very early on, but that's not true. She was actually, I think, 13 at the time. She'd actually been working in the business, and she was actually 3. She always played like kind of a creepy kid in horror movies, but she played Princess Harmony in an episode of Stargate Atlantis. And I remember being on set with her and her mom, Valerie, and she just amazed me because she played this precocious, spoiled brat princess character, but Jodelle knew all of her lines, and she knew all of Joe Flanagan and David Hewlett's lines. So if they ever like stumbled over a line, she would prompt them. So she knew everything, and she was brilliant. And so in my mind, it was 13-year-old Jodelle Ferland when I was writing the character. And then when it came time to cast, I thought, why don't I get Jodelle? You know, the character, we can play her a little older. You know, I'll reach out to Jodelle to audition. She did, and she nailed it, and she was fantastic. You know, and it just kind of made, Jodelle was like 19 at the time. It's very tough to cast a child actor on any show just because there are kind of labor laws, and they can only spend a certain amount of time on set because they have to pursue their you know, their high school classes. I mean, if you could find like a high school dropout, wonderful, then you're set. But it's very rare that happens. So, you know,
that's
better to cast like, you know, 18 and over.
Yeah, so that makes sense that that she nailed lines that sort of you envisioned her saying to begin with that were almost patterned after her in a way.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to say too that like she's probably played one of the only hackers that are believable. Like hackers in movies are just, you know, it's sit in front of the keyboard and type a lot kind of thing, but they don't really sell what they're doing. But she could kind of sell it, and just it's such a neat dynamic with that. So very, very cool. You mentioned screenplays and things too, in a way that writing for TV and writing for movies. Have you? And pardon me if I missed that you've produced a number of movies, but have you written for movies and TV?
I have written features, but nothing produced. Just getting a film produced is just such a long shot. And to be honest with you, as a writer, you know, you sell a script and then the director takes over, and film is really a director's game. You know, you always see that directed by, or a Spike Lee film, or a so-and-so film. Right. The writer, you know, sort of the writers union allows them to be on set, to visit set, but they're not really treated very well, and often they're rewritten. And but TV is really the writer's realm. Because as a writer, you can work your way up to the showrunner position and become the boss, something that that rarely ever happens in film.
Okay. I had to try to see what it was like to write screenplay. So I decided to use my book. So I had to rewrite my book again, and it hurt my brain because there are things that you do on a screenplay that you don't do in a book, and vice versa. Yes. Like hearing someone's thoughts in a book is pretty normal. But you know, that's a lot of exposition in a movie, and like no one, like I think of Dune, the original Dune, and how there was a lot of you could hear the thoughts of people. Yeah. And so for some reason that worked because it was an interesting movie, but there's so much that you don't describe in some ways, and so much you do describe in some ways. Yes. And that I also learned that you don't tell people where they're pointing their cameras. You don't do any of that stuff in there.
No, that is all to the director. It's funny because very early on in my career, as most first-time writers, you think, oh, you know, high angle shot, then I'm going to go to the bird's eye, and then the 2-shot. And I mean, you can learn all that, and that's very interesting, but you don't want any camera angles on your, you know,
Yeah,
in your script.
in your script, yeah. So, and in a book though, you have you can completely control the attention of a person and what they're experiencing, what they're imagining. You can even use metaphors and comparisons to get them to see something in a way that you can't really do visually in a movie.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a very interesting medium for that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very cool. Do you, when it comes to creating and so you mentioned the writer's room before, just to kind of put a picture in people's minds. When you're working on a project, let's say if someone's working as a writer, are they typically one of many writers in a room? Is that kind of...
if they're hired to be on a production, then yeah, they're in the writer's room. So that's what Paul and I did, and all the other writers did on Stargate. Is at the end of every season, we would gather and throw out ideas for the next season, and best idea wins. And you just sit in the room for several days, and you spin or you beat out the story. You just put it up on the whiteboard, and you break it down. It was 5 acts. Each act ends with that dun 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 scene or moment that sends you off into the commercial, but it's so compelling that you want to stick around and see how things are resolved. And so each act is made up of 4 to 5 scenes each, and then you would break down each scene, what happens in each scene, and then once you would have this essentially a beat sheet, you would go off and flesh it out into a full outline, and then you hand it off to the writers, and they would provide notes, and you would rewrite it and hand it off back to them. They would have more notes, and then you would head off to write your first draft.
Wow, that's pretty. It's set design and everything else you said you're involved in, and I have to make one comment, not to dwell on dark matter, but sometimes I thought, how big are these sets? Like when they're running through hallways, and I know there's a lot of camera tricks you can do, and you stop people around and stuff, but very, very impressive sets on that show. Very, like, it made me think of like the Next Gen, but even far, far more impressive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ian Brock was our production designer, and he was absolutely brilliant. I love the look, the interior of the Raza.
The
Raza looks more kind of Nostromo than Enterprise, kind of darker and a little bit of steam here and there. Yeah, we had really that one corridor that we just redressed, and so we were able to and kind of reposition the walls, all moved, and so we could just kind of transform the halls into different looks with different lighting as well, and different kind of wall, textures. And it's the same thing we did in Stargate. I remember Stargate, the Daedalus. We did this long, I think it was like a 2-minute walk and talk with Colonel Caldwell, and I forget who else. And it was just, they were actually going around in a circle, but the way, when they would pass through a section of the hallway, the crew would come in and readjust so that by the time they came around,
real time,
like a really different hallway. Yeah, so it looked like endless hallways on that Daedalus, but it was really just kind of that circular hallway that really only went around and around.
So how important is music to you when it comes to your creative projects?
It's absolutely very important, but I'm a guy who finds a lot of the time just music, I find the music is intrusive. And I think a little goes a long way for me. Benjamin Pinkerton was our the music, the original music for Dark Matter, and I love what he did. Joel Goldsmith was a genius on Stargate, and I love what he did. But I just find a lot of the shows I watch, the music is just so it just commands my attention when I want to sort of listen to the dialogue. Sometimes music is there to kind of at times sort of tell you how to feel, right? Or to kind of enhance the dialogue. But a lot of the times it's just so overt and in your face that I find it distracting. So for me, a little goes a long way.
Yeah, I think for me, it's kind of like the audio version of too much hand-holding, right? It's, like you said, it's telling you how to feel, and that's what it's supposed to do. And I think Marvel movies are bit that way where they tell you, okay, this is the good part and this is the and their handling of humor sometimes too, and I know they get a lot of flack for that too, that when it comes to the humor sort of like breaking someone out of a position that they're in. I think those are elements that they have in common with music. So I'm a huge fan of that kind of music to begin with. Like I'll kind of clamp onto something from a show and just like put it on my workout tape, and I'll just love it for like a week. And Dark Matter is one of those. Like I found a YouTube video that just was basically the end credits of it, and I just such a fun kind of. And it's interesting too, because you actually teach yourself psychologically how to feel when you feel the end credits, like, oh, like there's that sigh and that expectation of, oh my God, what's going to happen in the next episode, sort of thing. Yeah. How do you, speaking of that, how do you feel about like binge watching? Not you personally, but when people binge watch your stuff.
I have no problem with it. I mean, I often said, people go back and forth in terms of serialized versus episodic. And for me, as a creator, I love the episodic format because it allows you to, as I said, sort of set up and pay off along the way.
Yeah.
One of the big arguments that they go back and forth is, a lot of fans are upset because you don't really see these 20 plus season sci-fi shows anymore. They're either like 10 or 13 or 6 or 8. And, I tell them, for me, as a writer, if I was working on someone else's show, if I was hired to be in someone else's room, I would rather do like a 20 plus episode season because, just more scripts to go around. As a creator of a series or writer, I think 10 to 13 is perfect for season because it's just creatively, that is like a great kind of target to hit in terms of being able to tell a story over the course of a full season. As a viewer, I like the 6 to 8 episode format in that I don't have to invest, an inordinate amount of time on a show, to get like a season under my belt.
Wow. So both Stargate and Dark Matter, I sort of found after the fact. I think Stargate was in its 4th season when I actually discovered it. And it was such a bizarre thing for me because up until then, I had never binge watched anything. And I found it, and it was such an amazing thing. I think it had just switched from sci-fi to another network.
Yeah. And 6th season, SG1 moved to sci-fi.
And that's right when you came aboard, was season 4, right?
Yeah, season 4. So Paul and I joined in the show's 4th season, and the producers told us, well, we'll do 5 more. We'll do one more season 5, and that's what shows usually do. And then we'll be done and go our separate ways. And then we heard, Sci-Fi is going to pick us up for 6th season. We're like, great. And of course, that was going to be the final season. And the show surpassed our expectations, and we ended up getting picked up. And then we get picked up for season 8. And then we get picked up for season 9. And then we got picked up for season 10. And, and what I'm saying that every time, we got picked up, I always assumed this is the last season we're going to do until the 10th season when I convinced myself we were going to come back for season 11. And then we did not.
You didn't.
Yes. Although we almost did. I have mentioned before that Apple had actually reached out. This is, when they were first establishing iTunes, and they had reached out about the possibility of saving SG1 and doing a final 11th season.
Wow.
And then Sci-Fi exercised a clause in their contract that prohibited MGM from pursuing other homes. So we almost could have had an 11th season if not for Sci-Fi's general spitefulness. So this is sort of another, mark against them, a black mark against them.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Very, very interesting. Very interesting stuff behind the scenes. So because I picked it up after the fact, I went back and just started watching. It was like discovering something that you love, and there's 4 seasons already of it.
Yes.
That was unheard of. So I went out and I bought the DVDs at the time. The same thing with Dark Matter, where I discovered that, and I saw your name on it. I saw, I watched a little bit of it, and I thought, wait a second, I don't know what's going to happen. Perfect. I'm like, please don't let me run into anything, because it seems like every trailer for a movie now tells you the entire movie. Like in the olden days, they'd tell you little bits of it, but now half the movies you don't need to see.
Yes, it's very annoying. I hate being so far ahead, of the characters on screen. It would just drive me nuts. And they sci-fi used to do that on SG1 all the time. We did an episode called The Curse, where in like the final, third act, you find out that Sarah Gardner, this woman from Daniel Jackson's past, is really Osiris Goa'uld, and they reveal it in the promo, and then it's kind of the same way when we the character of Carson Beckett was killed on Atlantis. We brought him back, and it was the final reveal at the end of this two-parter, the Kindred two-parter, where they break into a jail cell and they're shocked, and it's him, and he's like, "What took you so long?" And that's like the final scene of that episode. And then they're doing the promo for the episode, and they were like, "You won't believe the last 5 minutes," and then they show it, and I'm like, Of course they're gonna believe the last 5 minutes. You showed it to them.
You showed it to them. Yeah. You won't believe what we're about to show you right now.
Yeah. I just again, I don't want to go off on sci-fi, but they used to do stuff like that. They just to drive me crazy. And their marketing department, like I always felt like we never get, they would never really market our show enough. It was the same with Dark Matter, because we were an acquisition, and they would be like, "Hey, we'd be like, are you going to market the show at all?" And they're like, "Yeah, I mean, is there something you can like tell us that could get the marketing, like our marketing team excited?" And I'm like, you know what could get your marketing team excited? Pay them. Tell them they're actually working for a paycheck. And if they don't want to do marketing, friend to fire them. That should excite them.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't believe it. Like they had to be excited. They had to be excited about something, in order to properly market it.
Wow.
It doesn't really excite me.
Yeah, you think like step 1, learn about products. Step 2, get excited. Step 3, market. Step 4, profit. That whole thing.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. It's interesting. I think the average viewer has no clue that those are separate entities. Like I remember years ago thinking that, why did they tell me that? Why did they show me that? And I thought, well, it's not a they. It's a segment. It's it makes writers angry. It makes creators angry sometimes when the marketers do that. And I remember reading something, I think it might have been on X, about someone involved in Marvel who was very upset by his story being revealed because of the trailer. And he's like, I told them not to put that in the trailer. And it just gave away the whole thing.
Yeah, they won't listen to you. The marketing department just, like in movies, it's terrible in movies. They just, want to get, they think that this will get, seats in theaters or eyeballs on screen if you tell them as much as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting too now about how many ways people view things. They, the actual theatrical release and the re-releases and stuff like that, and series and then box sets and all that stuff. So it's interesting seeing how people consume things now and how that affects the way that they market them.
Yeah.
But so would you say you've always written sci-fi?
I would say, I grew up reading comic books, and then my mother diverted me to sci-fi, actual novels. And so I grew up, I was always a fan of horror and sci-fi. I mean, a big fan of like the old Twilight Zone show. And so, I would write short stories when I was in high school, very much in the sci-fi realm. But most of my career, it's like 350 of those 400 hours in my credits are sci-fi. But having said that, I don't watch a lot of sci-fi. I enjoy watching horror. For instance, every October I try to do like a horror movie a day, count down through the 31 days of October, and I'm 3 horror movies in so far. But I love the crime genre. I'm also I'm up 225 books into my 2025 crime fiction release. But I don't watch, and I say 225 seems very impressive, but like a quarter of them I do not finish, just because after a while I'm like, I cannot. It's just not very good. But I appreciate the books that are not very good much more the books that are mediocre, because the books that are not very good, they're not very good very, very early on. And you set them aside. The ones that are mediocre, you're always wondering, is this going to pay off somehow, or is this going to turn around? And more often than not, it doesn't. You have to read the entire book to come to that conclusion. I'm also about 800 shows into this international crime binge I've been doing for over several years, where I watched every crime show, from foreign language and obviously from the US and in the UK. So if you need any recommendations for an Argentinian prison show, a great Indian procedural, or a Dutch mob series, I'm your guy.
Wow. Okay, so Kolchak the Night Stalker.
Oh yeah, classic. Yeah, the best of both worlds.
Yeah. That really, it just has such an aura to it. I don't know why, but it's funny how some older television just has such a creep factor that you almost can't attain now. Yeah. It can just do, even though the special effects are horrible, but it just has a creep factor.
There's something about the 70s horror in general that has kind of that kitsch quality, that kind of luridness that it's just deeply unsettling. That, I agree. It's just, not the same.
Yeah, and you can't really attain it now because it just seems too overproduced or too clear.
Yes, exactly.
It's too clear, and it's just there's not enough left of the imagination. So I'm really thrilled that you are on that page, that you love to give the payoff to your audience, and you love to not overly handhold and things like that. And your outlook on music is fascinating, actually, that it makes complete sense about how it's intrusive. So it surprises me and doesn't surprise me. So I think that's a really cool thing.
I mean, no, I think it's absolutely, it really helps a lot. Like I said, Joel Goldsmith is brilliant on Stargate. But I mean, Stargate, I think, is a good example where we didn't overuse or oversaturate the episodes with music. A little went a long way.
Right, and I think especially, what is it? Is there a I think each character sort of has their own theme, and there's
yes.
When you
will do that, they'll give each character their own.
Yeah,
it's very subtle.
Once you get it, you get it. It's just another one of those subtle things that once you get it, you're like, oh, I get it now. And Jack and isn't there a Jack and Carter's theme too? And that
I think so. Yeah,
that hits you really hard when that plays because it almost never
subliminal,
plays.
But yeah,
it's really hard. Yeah, that is really good stuff. Do you have an episode, let's say, and this is just such a silly thing to ask you, do you have an episode of SG1 that is kind of your favorite that you've?
Well, the one I mentioned, Ripple Effect, was a favorite of mine. Just because I'm a big fan of just general sci-fi concepts, and I love the alternate universe concept. That you kind of turn it on its head. Instead of us visiting the alternate universe, which is what most shows do, the alternate universes come to us in myriad ways. And again, in terms of a very satisfying, I love the fact that I was able to sort of figure out that plot point, that it just kind of came to me. Whenever I look back at that episode, it's just, as a writer, very satisfying. And also, I mean, I just kind of love the idea of the road not taken. This is something that alternate universes allow you to do. And so that episode kind of allowed us to explore certain aspects of the show that you would thought storylines we had left for dead, literally the Janet Fraser character comes back, the Mark II character came back, and kind of a reward for longtime fans as well.
Yeah, that's what you can do. That's what people are excited about, alternate universe stuff, where they do get to see how someone lived. And there was the episode about the mirror.
The quantum mirror. Yes.
Yeah, to see where they actually did get together and how sad that was, and because she still lost him. Oh my God! To kind of give the audience what they want and then take it away, and it's just because the whole tension, the whole romantic tension, is not an easy thing to do between two characters, because it's like two magnets and you get them too close together and you're like, okay, I ruined it.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
And I want to. We're coming up on an hour, and I promised you I wouldn't take more than an hour of your valuable time. So please don't let me go any further if you don't have the time for it. But I had a question about. Was it? I think production of. Oh, that's okay. Now I know it is. This is going to be an interesting question. So the difference between science fiction and fantasy. Simple question, right?
I mean, it's funny. I've over on X. I'm fairly active on X. This is how we got.
You are.
Now we
sell
if you're a first-time writer or even like a fan, get on X. I find X as a platform, with all due respect to the other platforms, just the easiest one to be able to contact creators and just interact with them and comment on their posts. And some are more willing to interact than others, and it's just sort of a great way to sort of interact with some of your favorite creators. But one of the things I've been doing is I've been doing this spaceships. So basically classic spaceships, and having fans vote on them. And I saw this kind of interesting discussion. Moya was up there from Farscape, and I love Farscape. And it's interesting. One of the commenters said something to the effect of, I love Farscape, but it's not science fiction. It's really more fantasy. And the way they broke it down in terms of sort of like, the things they explored and how they explored them, he made a very good point. To me, it's sci-fi, but in his mind, it's fantasy. For me, I mean, fantasy is essentially without rules, if you will. And I'll kind of explain it. And I think science fiction at least has the grounding of theoretical science, whereas fantasy is magic for the most part. And nothing drives me like crazier than magic. I hate magic as an element in any story, because more often than not, there are no rules to magic, So, I mean, I'm watching Lord of the Rings, a great movie. And it's like, why doesn't Gandalf teleport them out of the cave when they get into danger? It's like, well, Gandalf doesn't know that spell. Oh, well, how fortuitous for the writer that, he doesn't know that spell. So I don't know. I find magic, unless there's a very clear framework, I find it a cheat. And it offers opportunities for contrivances and conveniences in storytelling. And that's just something that I personally find dramatically unsatisfying.
So it's very interesting that you say that, because that's sort of how I felt too, in that, and then I kind of learned that there's sort of hard magic and soft magic, if you will, and that the soft magic is that anything can happen because I'm the author, and that doesn't work that way, or it's never going to. And the hard magic is more of you establish rules of that sort of thing.
Yeah,
I would be more of a fan of like the hard magic thing, where like, no, you said this is the way it works, so it's not going to work that way. Don't change the rule. Now I don't know what's going on. I don't care anymore.
I need the rules. The rules.
Right.
Yes.
I need the rules, and that's why, right, sci-fi is that way. In fact, that's all people are doing in sci-fi is explaining, well, the reason that this is because the plasma shield works this way, and so on and so forth. So that does make sense, because it feels right. But I feel like there's still this blurry line with sci-fi and fantasy, at least, where and it's the whole, any sufficiently advanced civilization and so forth. I get that. So there is a little bit of that. It's just like with the Nox, that was you don't know, and then you see the giant city and so forth. So is it still magical, or is it not? Is it just super, and typically we take science fiction and we assign it to objects. Like even like, okay, well, why are you able to do that? Well, nanites. You can't see them, but there's nanites.
Right. Yes.
I am super powered. Even like Captain America had this super soldier serum, but that's still science. But you could just say I took a potion of strength or whatever.
Yes, exactly. Right? As long as there's that scientific, theoretical underpinning, I will allow it. One of the things that I think is kind of annoying, even past that, is the author didn't think past a few years. Like, oh, there's this magic and people float around with this thing. Well, if they can do that, then you just ruin the economy. Like, so if they've had this for 100 years, there'd be no animals anymore or whatever. Like, they'll introduce a thing and you'll think there's no sustainability, there's no longevity with that. Nothing would be like the way that you're talking about it at all. So that's the part that really removes me out of the story. But I don't read a huge amount of fantasy. And while I was writing, I didn't do that sort of thing. But you amaze me in that you seem to absorb and gravitate towards so much fiction at the same time. And you talk about it on X. You're very active on X at the same time. You're starting polls, the things with the ships and things like that. I think you shouldn't sell yourself short, because most people aren't like you in your position. Most people on X
larger accounts usually cut and paste things, and then they let people fight about it.
Yeah, right.
But you actually interact with your audience, and I mean, it says so much about you that it's a big kudo to you to do that. Yeah,
I have something in my eyes. So but yeah, I appreciate I appreciate the fandom, and one of the things I always say about fandom is that they're amazing because they're very passionate about what you produce, but it's a double-edged sword, right? So on the one hand, if they love what you produce, they'll get behind you 100%, and it just feels great. But if you cross them, you kill off a character, or what have you, they will cut you. That double-edged sword, they have very long memories.
Wow, that's true. Yeah, that's sort of you're up on that high place and can be praised or knocked over, I suppose, and roll down the other side. So I'm glad I really got to you there. It really hit you.
I'm tearing up. I think at first I thought it was because I had something spicy or got sunscreen in my eye, but I think it's actually your words are very emotional.
That's very kind. It sounds completely sincere too. I really appreciate it. Well, very cool. So I want. Is there an upcoming project that you'd like to talk about at all?
In this business, is feast or famine. I was very lucky to work 12 years on Stargate, and then, it was 17 years, 12 seasons, and then almost immediately followed that with Dark Matter for 3 years. Yeah. And then I did another project, which was a kind of a friend's project. And then since then, I've just kind of been writing and going out and pitching. I'm not really interested in going and working on someone else's show, unless it's like a friend of mine gets a show, or unless, let's say, Amazon calls me up and is like, "Hey, we're rebooting Stargate. We would love to have you come into the room." And unless that happens, I think I'd rather just keep, slugging away and trying to get my own project off the ground. And then so I'm out with actually three projects actually, and all three of them are actually in the crime realm. So. Again, but very much like what I do in sci-fi, kind of quirky characters, colorful characters, the kind of undercurrent of humor. But again, I mean, who knows what the future holds? Maybe something will land, or maybe 5 years from now when we do this again, I'll tell you I'll be working on another string of projects I have in development.
Well, I'm very encouraged that you've already agreed to appear again, but I'm disheartened that I have to wait 5 years.
Well, maybe you don't have to wait 5 years. This has gone well, so we can certainly do this again.
I'm glad. I appreciate that, because I'd love to, because you have so much to talk about. It's so fun, and I'd love to, but I don't want to take up too much of your valuable time.
No,
so I think it's
my pleasure.
So I would encourage anyone listening to this that to definitely seek you out on X and give you a follow. And you'll see that you're very much interacting with people, and it's fun because you're engaging people to ask their questions to get answers to them, and then you respond to their answers sometimes. I mean, that's
to be honest,
crazy.
I was amazed. I've gone through, I think, 7 rounds of these 4-ship questionnaires, and one round had Andromeda Ascendant, the ship from the series Andromeda, a show that I never watched. That is totally off the radar as far as I'm concerned, and that ship overwhelmingly beat out some pretty heavy hitters, and that really surprised me. So I mean, I love doing these to find out sort of like where the sci-fi fandom is at.
Yeah. I think I saw 2 episodes of Andromeda. Actually, I made it through sort of like what's really the genesis of it, and I was like, okay, now this is how it's going to be. So that was. I did like the ship. The ship is very pretty. So. I did like the ship, so cool. Any other shout outs or anything you'd like to mention to people since we're listening?
No, just come find me, Baron Destructo on X. I also have a blog, josephmallozzi.com, where I blog. I've been blogging every day since 2007, back in my Stargate days. So usually when I'm in production, most of my blog will have to do with whatever show I'm in production on. I'm kind of the antithesis of a lot of producers, and that a lot of producers, like Star Trek, God forbid you release anything about the show prior to when it airs. Whereas I'm the opposite. Unless it's a spoiler, I love to get the fans excited about stuff. So if I posted ship designs and sketches and behind the scenes stuff for all my productions. So when I'm in productions or gearing up for production in post, that's what I usually blog about. When I'm not, I will blog about everything from, for instance, the horror movies I'm watching now to the crime books I'm reading to
food
of my Puggles shark. Anything goes.
Yeah, I've even seen posts about food where you ask about soups and pizzas and things that. Yeah,
I'm a foodie as well.
Very, very, very impressive. So again, I want to keep my word. So it's been about an hour. So I'm thrilled that you were able to make it, and thank you for the candor. I appreciate that very much.
This was a lot of fun. Where are you, by the way, Mark? Where are you situated?
Oh, I'm in Wisconsin.
Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Excellent. Should I ever find my way in Wisconsin? We have to do dinner.
Please, let's do dinner. I would love to do that. Yeah, and you're on the East Coast.
I am. I'm in Toronto.
Toronto. Oh, very nice. Very nicely done. Okay, I would love that. Let's do that, please.
Excellent.
All right.
Good luck to your Packers.
Thank you. Thank you again for joining us, and take care of yourself.
Thanks, Mark.
Well, I just want to be happy. How to get there? Glad that you asked me. I think it's different for everyone. Some of us need work, others need fun. Some of us need purpose to overcome. But try to do what you love when it's said and done. Cause there's so many differences in each of us. Trust your gut, it can show you what you want. Living life, every day, late at night, not okay. All I want, and I pray, all I need are some better days.
I want to announce that my new book, my 10th, is out. It's called Because, the fundamental psychological building blocks that enable you to, or prevent you from, accomplishing anything, everything, and nothing. Check it out on Amazon. It's only $9.99.